Hey guys, welcome back to the Commercial Law School. Today we will be giving you some advice on how to approach the dreaded Watson Glaser test so you can improve your chances of actually passing the test. So, the Watson Glaser test is a psychometric test used by many firms like Linklaters, Clifford Chance, Hogan Lovells, CMS and other firms during the application process. So if you're considering making an application to any firm that requires a Watson Glaser test, then stay tuned. So the Watson Glaser test is generally comprised of these 5 sections, and each section is testing a different skill. So we will start off with some general Watson Glaser advice, and then we will explore each section in more depth. Firstly, you need to be very time conscious. The Watson Glaser test is normally around half an hour with 40 questions to answer. So you need to keep an eye on the clock and ensure that you're giving equal time to each section. This might seem difficult at first, but once you understand what each section is asking for, and once you've done more practice, your time management will naturally improve. And that leads me on nicely to my second piece of advice, which is that practice makes perfect. The more you attempt the Watson Glaser test, the more comfortable you'll become with the style of questions. To help you practice the test, we will link some free resources in the description bar below. You should also use the practice questions given at the start of each section during the test. These will give you some insight into how each section should be approached. Also, make sure you complete the test alone. There are some firms like Hogan Lovells who require you to retake the test at an assessment centre, so you want to make sure that you'd be able to reproduce those high results at the assessment centre. Finally, one thing that I found useful was to break down the given passages into shorter sentences or bullet points. So rather than having to look at a lengthy passage each time, I will just refer to my shortened notes, which were much easier to digest. This also helped my time management because I didn't have to continuously reread the entire passage. I would simply refer to my notes. Okay, so now that we have covered some general Watson Glaser tips, we are going to consider some examples and advice for each individual section. So the first section that you will come across is the Assessment of Inferences section. In this section you are presented with a passage and you have to take all the information given to you as true. This means that you should avoid using any outside knowledge to answer the question. Following the passage, you'll be presented with a series of inferences and you need to establish whether the inference is true, probably true, whether there is insufficient data, whether it is probably false or false. To be classed as true, the inference can be made confidently beyond a reasonable doubt. To be classed as probably true, the inference is more true than false, but it is not definite enough to be true. To be classed as having insufficient data, the passage does not provide enough information for you to reach a solid conclusion. To be classed as probably false, the inference is more false than true, but it is not definitely false. And to be classed as false, the inference is undoubtedly false. So let's have a look at an example. In this example, we are told that 30 students in a class of 60 complained about the dinners offered at school. They all voted to replace the current school dinners menu with an all-new menu chosen by students at the school. The first inference says that the 30 students in the class that complained about the dinners ate school dinners every day instead of a packed lunch, and we need to establish whether that is true, probably true, whether we have insufficient data, whether it is probably false or false. The answer is that we have insufficient data. This is because the text does not say how often they ate the dinners, just that they complained about the dinners. They could have had packed lunches every other day, so there is no evidence to suggest this inference. The next inference says that the 30 students who complained wanted to keep eating the same school dinners. And again, we need to establish whether this is true, probably true, whether we have insufficient data, whether it is probably false, or whether it is false. The correct answer is that it is false. You can infer from the text that the students did not want to keep eating the same school dinners because they voted to replace the menu. We will now move on to the recognition of assumptions section. In this section, you are given a passage which is followed by a number of assumptions. Your job is to decide, from the information provided, whether or not an assumption has been made. So let's look at an example. In this example, we are told that Sarah is exercising every day so she can fit into her wedding dress, which is 3 sizes too small for her. The first assumption is that Sarah wants to lose weight. so we must determine whether or not that assumption has been made. From the information provided, we can say that the assumption has been made, because if her dress is currently too small, we can assume that Sarah wants to lose weight to fit into it. The second assumption is that Sarah thinks exercise is necessary for a healthy lifestyle. So again, we must decide whether or not that assumption has been made. From the information provided, the assumption is not made. The statement doesn't mention anything about Sarah's desire to be healthy. It only focuses on a short-term goal, which is fitting into her wedding dress. Now we will consider deductions. Again, you are given a statement or passage with information which is followed by a number of conclusions. Your job is to decide whether or not those conclusions follow from the information provided. Remember to avoid incorporating your own knowledge into your answers. In our example, the statement says, "Some vegetables are tasty, all vegetables are healthy." And the first conclusion is that all tasty vegetables are healthy. So we need to decide whether or not that conclusion follows. From the information provided, we can say that the conclusion does follow. If all vegetables are healthy, then they are healthy regardless of the taste. The next conclusion is that healthy vegetables do not taste good. So again, we need to decide whether or not that conclusion follows. From the information provided, we can say that the conclusion does not follow for the same reasons as given before. The final conclusion is that even though burgers are tasty, they are unhealthy. This conclusion does not follow. Just because vegetables are healthy, it doesn't mean that burgers are unhealthy. So when answering these questions, remember not to use your outside knowledge. The next section is the interpretation section. This section is relatively similar to the deduction section because you have to answer whether or not the conclusion follows. But the difference is whether the conclusion follows beyond a reasonable doubt. Here is an example. Femi and Gabriel sold lemonade from 12 p.m. to 5 p.m. Between 3:30 p.m. and 5 p.m. their sales increased from 0 to 15 and their lemonade sold out. That day, their total earnings were £35. So the first conclusion is that Femi and Gabriel had not made any money in lemonade sales at 1 p.m. This conclusion follows because Femi and Gabriel only started making sales after 3:30 p.m. and before that, their sales were at 0. The next conclusion is that they made the most sales in the last hour. This conclusion does not follow because the text does not specify when they made the most sales. Finally, we will consider the evaluation of arguments section. This section analyzes your ability to distinguish between strong and weak arguments. In this section, it is easy to let your personal opinions influence whether you think the argument is strong or weak, so keep your opinions out of your consideration. For an argument to be strong, it has to be relevant, focused, clear, directly related to the question, and also it must make sense. For an argument to be considered weak, it will be unclear, not directly related to the question, unfocused, or it may perhaps focus on an unimportant aspect of the question. So you need to know these distinctions to do well in this section. So the question that is posed is, should people switch from plastic straws to paper straws to reduce harm to aquatic life? The first argument says yes, plastic straws are more expensive and you would save money by buying paper straws. This is a weak argument because the question is about harm to aquatic life and therefore costs are not relevant. The second argument talks about how plastic straws are harmful to sea life, whereas paper straws are recyclable, so switching to them will reduce harmful waste, which in turn will prevent avoidable harm to aquatic life. This is an example of a strong argument because it raises relevant points in favour of switching to paper straws and it explains the outcome of switching to paper straws. That is all we have for today. We hope that you found this video useful, and if you have, please like, share, comment and subscribe. We've also attached some links to some free resources where you can practice the Watson Glaser test in our description bar. Thanks for watching. See you next time.